The purpose of this video is to help Sullair distributors technicians better understand the basic operation and configuration of the C-Pro controller panel. We'll also include the demonstration of calibration of the transducers and the Regen process. The features of the C-Pro panel include LCD digital display, service air pressure gauge, compressor temperature gauge, fuel level gauge, engine temperature gauge, display contrast buttons, power on-off switch, menu select exit switch, menu toggle switch, high-low pressure selector switch, cabin light switch, force inhibit regeneration switch, diagnostic service port, compressor OK lamp, compressor warning lamp, compressor shutdown lamp, compressor air filter warning lamp, high compressor temperature lamp, cabin light lamp, battery disconnect lamp, remote start lamp, diesel particulate filter, high exhaust system temperature, regeneration inhibit lamp, low fuel lamp, diesel exhaust fluid lamp, high coolant temperature lamp, engine air filter warning lamp, wait to start lamp, engine shutdown lamp, check engine lamp, engine OK lamp. We are now going to demonstrate the power-up of the C-Pro control panel. When the ignition switch is turned to the on position, all warning indicators will prove out. The gauges will go from 0% to 50% and then to 100%, then sweep back to 0. While this is happening, checking system will be displayed on the LCD screen. The C-Pro at this time is checking all inputs and outputs for integrity. If everything is good, it will then go to the ready state. The ready state is just letting you know that it is ready for you to press the ignition switch to the crank position. Following the successful completion of the power-up sequence, the system is ready for normal operation. At this point, the operator can either continue to start the machine, or if needed can go into settings and diagnostic menu to maybe tailor the machine to his needs. What we're going to cover now is the settings and diagnostics menu. Once the initialization sequence is complete and from the ready state, the operator can enter the settings and diagnostics menu by holding the select exit switch in the select position for 2 seconds. This will bring up the settings menu. The toggle switch is used to scroll up and down through the current menu list. Here I'm going to toggle through all 9 selections available in this menu. First of all, set units, large font display, set language, operational configuration, C-Pro diagnostics, backlight adjustment, engine diagnostics, I/O module diagnostics, engine shutdown history, and back to the beginning. Pressing on the up arrow of the toggle button simply takes your selection up the menu rather than down. Again, you can scroll up and down through the menu using both the up and down arrow. Let's now take the time to familiarize ourselves with each of the 9 menu items. We'll start with set units. Here we can choose between English or metric measurements. Next, large font display. This allows us to change the font display on the LCD screen. Choosing large font display only allows you to see 2 line parameters. By setting this to no, we'll be able to display 4 parameters at one time on the panel. We're going to go ahead and set this to small font display so I can display 4 parameters at once. So we'll revisit that later on in the video. Next is set language. By selecting this menu item, you can choose from several different languages: English, French, Spanish, German, Italian, Portuguese. The next menu item is operational configuration. There's quite involved in here. 1. Enable remote start momentary, remote start P1 value, remote start P1 time, uses canopy, auto sleep configuration, after coolers, after filters, fuel tank configuration, pressure calibration, and temperature calibration. We're going to take the time to visit a couple of the important ones. We're going to cover enable remote start and the pressure calibration options. We'll start off with enable remote start. Once highlighted, enter the operational configuration menu item by using the select switch. Once in the operational configuration menu, choosing the item you're looking for is simple as scrolling up and down as you did in the previous menu. Here we have selected the enable remote start. To activate that selection, simply press down on the select switch. Once you have entered the enable remote start option, you have a selection of yes or no to take. Once in the enable remote start option, you can scroll up and down selecting yes or no. No disables the remote start, yes enables it. We have selected yes, and to make that selection active, we hit the select button. Once you confirm your selection, you will be taken back to the previous menu. We're now going to cover the pressure calibration option. This should be done every time you do a check-in procedure getting the unit for the next rental. Once pressure calibration is highlighted, simply use the select button to activate your selection. You have now three options: service pressure, control pressure, and wet pressure. This is P1, P2, and P3. Highlight the one you want to calibrate first, and then we'll start with P1, which is service pressure. Hit the select button to activate your selection, and it takes you into the calibration screen for P1. Once P1 is calibrated, you can then select your next menu option, which is control pressure, which is P2, and go in and calibrate that one. Again, you activate your selection by using the select button. When finished calibrating P2, you would exit out of there using the exit button, and that would take you back into the calibration screen where you have P1, P2, P3 available. Next, select wet pressure, which is P3. Activate your selection by using the select button. Go in and calibrate your transducer. The transducer is calibrated by using the toggle up and down arrows to change your offset and zero that out. The goal is to ultimately read 0 psi in the center. Once you're calibrated, again, use the exit button to exit out of that calibration screen and go back to your submenu. The fifth option is C-Pro Diagnostics. I'm going to select that. It has another submenu. Available in there is Gauge Test, where you can do a functionality test of the gauges, Lamp Test, functionality test of the lamps, LCD Test, functionality of the LCD, Binary Inputs, and Analog Inputs. Back out of there, you simply toggle back up to the beginning and hit the Select Exit button to the exit position. Number 6, backlight adjustment. This contains the following options: backlight color, and within this you can change the backlight color from red, green, blue, yellow, light blue, violet, and white. Then you have the background level, so you can adjust the brightness level of the background. 7, engine diagnostics. By selecting engine diagnostics, you can see if there's any active code stored in the engine ECM. 8, I/O module diagnostics. Here you can do an integrity test on the inputs and outputs of the module. The last and 9th menu item available in the Settings and Configuration menu is Engine Shutdown History. The C-Pro is capable of storing up to 5 shutdowns. Upon entering shutdown history, the latest shutdown will be the one displayed, and the hours of when it occurred. This down arrow indicates there are more shutdowns stored to view. Use the toggle switch to scroll up and down through the stored shutdowns. When you reach the view of the last shutdown stored, you'll notice that the arrow indicator will point up, indicating that you need to scroll up, that was the last one stored. As with the rest of the menu items, simply hit the exit toggle switch to exit from that menu. To exit from the Settings and Diagnostics menu, simply toggle the Select Exit button to exit. We will now demonstrate the startup of the compressor. For a manual start and from the ready state, toggle the ignition switch to the start, in other words crank position. Once the switch has been pressed to the start position, the controller will check status and automatically continue to energize the starter until either the engine starts or the maximum crank duration has been reached. If the compressor does not start on the first crank cycle attempt, it will by default programming automatically attempt 2 more crank cycles. If the compressor has not started after the third automatic crank attempt, it will display on the LCD screen and store in the shutdown history an overcrank condition. Once the engine is started, the C-Pro controller goes into the warm-up mode. During this time, the inlet valve is held closed and idle speed is commanded to minimum. This keeps the tank pressures down, allowing the engine to warm up freely, and keeps torsional vibration at a minimum to protect the coupling. How long the compressor is in the warm-up mode depends on 3 things: minimum warm-up time, maximum warm-up time, and engine coolant temperature. All 3 parameters are programmed into the C-Pro, and they can vary depending on engine model. During the warm-up, the C-Pro controller is energizing the start-run solenoid. This diverts the reducing regulator signal through the start-run solenoid valve directly to the control circuit, i.e. the closing feed port of the inlet. This holds the inlet closed so no more air can enter the compressor. This is what keeps your pressures down. The fact that you're in the warm-up mode, the C-Pro will be ignoring any signal it gets from P2 transducer. It will always have a desired RPM during warm-up of 1400 RPM being commanded to the engine ECM. Once the compressor has completed the warm-up cycle, the C-Pro controller will enter the compressor into the run mode. When in the run mode, the LCD display will look like this. In the run mode, the compressor is ready to supply the operator service air. The engine RPM and compressor air inlet will automatically be adjusted to maintain the desired capacity. Now that we are running, let's take a chance to look at all of the available parameters to view. Again, you have 4 parameters that you can display at once here on the LCD screen, and you can change what parameter you're viewing on any one of those 4 lines. I'm just going to go ahead and pick the second line down from the left and scroll through all the different parameters that you can bring up on any one of those 4 lines. You start out by using the select button to highlight one of the line parameters. Once highlighted, you can use the toggle button to scroll up and down to display your desired parameter. We'll start off with service pressure, which is P1, dry side system, control pressure, which is P2, wet pressure, which is P3, wet side, fuel level, engine speed actual, engine hours, engine total fuel consumed, compressor temperature, ADT, after cooler discharge temperature, coolant temperature, battery voltage, percentage of engine load, fuel rate, fuel pressure, fuel temperature, engine inlet air temperature, oil pressure, turbo boost pressure, desired engine speed, auxiliary pressure, auxiliary temperature, charge air temperature, inlet air temperature, soot level. What we'd like to demonstrate for you now is the 3 modes of operation: unloaded, modulated, and loaded. Monitoring control pressure is the best way to tell whether you're fully loaded or not. The exact point you reach 0 of control pressure while loading the machine is the point where you're going to be fully loaded. So I'm going to bring that up on the display. Here we are in an unloaded state. The ball valve is closed. No demand on the compressor whatsoever. You'll note the control pressure is at 70 psi. This is holding the inlet valve closed and dropping the engine RPM down to idle. It'll stay this way as long as there's no load on the machine. P2 is located in the control circuit. With 70 pounds on the control circuit and on P2, The C-Pro panel can use this information to determine whatever the desired engine RPM should be. Again, this is on the control circuit, which is also closing the inlet valve or allowing it to open as the signal goes away. So the inlet and the throttle react as one. As I open the ball valve slowly to simulate a demand on the compressor, we start to move towards the modulated state. I'm going to stop at about 30 pounds of control pressure and let it hover there for a while in modulation. This is right in the middle of the modulation zone. In other words, the machine's about half capacity. Displayed now is about mid-modulation. You'll notice that the control pressure is about 30 psi. This puts us right at about half capacity of the machine. The P2 pressure range that C-Pro utilizes to determine desired engine RPM is 0 to 60 psi. 60 psi being minimum idle speed, 0 psi being maximum idle speed. Anything in between would be 1400 and 1800 RPM. Here I'm going to open the ball valve further to simulate more load on the compressor. As this happens, you'll notice the control pressure will drop even more, going towards 0. The closer we get to 0, the more loaded the compressor is. By the time we reach 0, the compressor is at full load and maximum capacity. Shown here is the fully loaded state. Ball valve is just open far enough to drop control pressure down to 0. This means there's no pressure at all going to the closing feed port and the inlet should be completely open. It also means there's no pressure on P2. C-Pro sees this and adjusts the desired RPM being asked from the engine accordingly. What this all means is that the inlet is completely open, engine is at max RPM, and the machine is fully loaded. We are now at full capacity. Shown here, I'm closing off the ball valve. This simulates the operator's demand on the machine going down. We're going to go back to the unloaded state where control pressure will rise, the inlet valve will close, and RPM will subsequently drop to minimum idle RPM. Here we're going to demonstrate the exhaust regeneration procedure. The aftertreatment constantly monitors the soot levels of the exhaust gas. If the soot levels detected by the indicator reach above 80%, the engine electronic control module lights the DPF lamp on and the controller screen and should automatically trigger the ARD to ignite diesel fuel passing through the DPF until soot levels return to normal, less than 10%. During regeneration, the HEST lamp, high exhaust system temperature, on the controller screen should be lit. If for some reason the emissions module is not automatically engaged, regeneration can be achieved manually by holding the Regen switch in the force position on the controller for 15 seconds. This will manually force the regeneration process and soot levels between 15 and 105%. If regeneration is not desired, the automatic regeneration process can be halted by engaging the Regen switch to the inhibit position. If the regeneration is inhibited, the DPF inhibited lamp on the controller screen should be lit. Regeneration inhibition should not be a regular practice, as allowing soot load percentages to get above 116% could cause the unit to abnormally shut down and fault the DPF. The unit will not be able to function until the faulted DPF is replaced. Allow us now to demonstrate the regeneration process. What I'm going to do is hold the force inhibit toggle switch to the force position for 15 seconds. This will activate a force regeneration. You will see throughout the video how the soot level begins to drop. What you're seeing is the DPF being injected with air and fuel to burn off the particulate in the DPF filter. In this case, we're going to drop down to about 4% and then the regeneration process will end. We will now demonstrate the shutdown process. Take the unit from high to low. I close the discharge valve and turn the ignition switch off. The C-Pro then transitions from run mode to cool down mode. During cool down mode, the desired RPM of 1400 or minimum idle speed is demanded from the engine. The inlet is held in a fully closed position in a forced unloaded state. It will remain in cool down mode for approximately 2 minutes. The purpose of cool down mode is to cool the turbocharger. Once the cool down mode has expired, the panel will power off and shut the engine off and go into what's called blowdown mode. During blowdown, the panel will monitor pressures until a complete blowdown is achieved. At that point, it will power itself off.